I wanted to share a little bit about my hidden stealth ham radio installation. There's a lot of people that recommend installing it under the seats or even like in the console right here. But I decided to go with a different mount, which is actually on the back side of the console wall. So I've already have this removed from my vehicle, obviously, but if you go around here, this is the side that faces the rear seat bench, and there's this opening. It's got a seam with some clips that snap a decorative panel in place, and mounted on the transmission hump on the floor is an amplifier. And so there is a lot of space up in this cavity here, so I went ahead and I mounted my radio bracket. Now this is actually a little bit more difficult because this is a Yaesu FTM 6000R mounting bracket. So instead of having sideways bolts that go in through the side, it's got this slider mechanism, which makes it a little bit more difficult. Now what I did is I actually got some heavy duty adhesive Velcro and I Velcroed it in place so that way it was somewhat temporary until I could test fit everything. And then I just did 2 bolts that go through 1/4-inch hole, just bolts that into place. Now I'm able to pre-wire all of my wiring underneath the console, you know, on the outside of the shifter and like underneath this plastic trim right here. And it's just going to come up in the back and it should mount over on top of the existing amplifier. So I mentioned the difficulty with the Yaesu radio mount, and part of that is because to install it, you have to slide it into place. So I actually have to have the console out to be able to put the radio in and out of the bracket. But it's in the rails, the mounting rails right now. And if I just slide it up, it clicks into place. Now, the cup holders does block access up above, so I did use a couple 90-degree connectors on the antenna port. And you can see I'll have to bend the power cable and route that down. And then the remote cable for the remote head and for the microphone clip up under there. So I will have to use some care when reassembling everything. But there should be enough airflow here. It's in a relatively open cavity. And there also is a vent in the plastic decorative panel that covers this up, so it should allow some heat to dissipate. But this should be, once I clean up the wiring and get it installed, completely stealth, completely invisible. So you can see my radio body is installed right on top of that amp or other electronic device right there. I got to clean up the cables and get them routed underneath the console, but there is one final modification to the cover. So looking at the back side of the cover, this is kind of how it sits, and you can see this large rib on the back. This actually looks more like I'll call it a baffle. There are some vent holes there. So I assume this is to help aid in cooling of that amp or whatever that electronic box is down below. But I am going to have to cut it out. So if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe this isn't the spot to install a radio, but I am okay with removing that. I can't imagine that it'll have that drastic of an impact on cooling ability. Yes, I'm putting a ham radio back there as well, which will add heat, but I don't use it that frequently. It's, you know, I'm not one of those ham radio operators that talk every time I'm in the car. So I don't think it's really going to have much effect. So I'll take a Dremel and a cutoff wheel and just kind of cut it as flush as I can, so that way I can fit the radio body in there. So that's the type of Dremel cutoff wheel that I use. It allows you to get a pretty flush cut. On the back side of this plastic, you can get it pretty close, and as long as you're taking your time and, you know, paying attention to what you're cutting, you know, you're not going to cut through into the cosmetic side. So that gives me enough clearance for that radio body, and I'll be able to just pop this into place and cover it all up. And that is where my ham radio is mounted, right underneath this panel, completely invisible, stealth, and all I have is the radio control unit on the dash. Thought it was a pretty good way to not take up so much real estate for someone that is not all about ham radio, that's going to be talking on it all of the time, and just wanted something available occasionally but not taking over and dominating really the exterior and interior of my vehicle. So like and subscribe if you enjoy the content of these videos. Thanks for watching.